Welcome to Discovering the Law. My name is Lucy Rivera and I am the host of this program. This episode can be viewed at www.discoveringthelaw.com. Today we have a very special guest. We have the chairman of the State Ethics Commission, former justice and law professor, Barbara Dorch-Okara. Thank you for being here today, Your Honor.
It's my pleasure, Lucy.
Chairman Dorch-Okara.
Yes, thank you.
And you have been the chairman of the State Ethics Commission since last December.
Yes.
Tell us, how did you obtain that position, please?
Well, Governor Patrick appointed me to the position in December. I'm very happy about that. It's a 5-year term. He appointed me as chair, along with 4 other commissioners who serve the same term. Each commissioner is appointed either by the governor, by the Attorney General, or by the Secretary of State. Staggered terms so that we don't have go off on and off the commission at the same time.
Oh, and what is the role of the State Ethics Commission in government?
Well, our general obligation is to promote public trust in government and to make sure through the conflict of interest statute that people can have faith in the integrity of their government, state, county, and municipal government.
And it's a very important role. Do you serve with someone else? Who else serves with you in the State Ethics Commission?
Well, the other commissioners serve, and the staff itself runs the day-to-day office of the Ethics Commission. We have an excellent executive director, Karen Nober, and her staff. They perform the day-to-day requirements of the job, but we as commissioners oversee and set policy for the Ethics Commission.
And do you have a staff to support the commissioners?
Yes, the staff actually runs the commission on a daily basis. It's the legal department, there's an enforcement arm, and there is an arm that's referred to as the Public Education and Communications Division.
Now you started to talk about the role of the commissioners. Would you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, we have a pretty big role in performance of the duties of the commission. First of all, we have monthly meetings at which we oversee the work of the commission, and we give direction. We set policy about the commission. We hear matters that relate to complaints that are received. Apart from that, we have subcommittees that work at times other than during the meetings. Our subcommittees meet, and as chair, I serve on every subcommittee, so I have to attend those meetings as well. We have another role as well. We act as hearing officers for matters that have become public, that matters that are in what we call the adjudicatory stage, where complaints have reached a stage where there is a hearing, a subject of a complaint is entitled to a hearing, and we individually sit as hearing officers and hear evidence, live witnesses, documents, and the like, and ultimately make findings of fact and conclusions of law and dispose of those cases through the commission as a whole. The hearing officer commissioner will present the matter to the commission, and the commission as a whole will decide whether the resolution of a given complaint.
That is extremely difficult work. How does the commission go about its work and in the different areas like legal or educational?
Well, those divisions that I mentioned, the legal division, lawyers provide enormous assistance to members of the public. State employees, local employees, county employees, they provide respond to thousands of requests for advice about the conflict of interest law. They respond by phone, by email, in writing, and the like, to specific questions on a confidential basis.
Yes.
And sometimes write specific opinions, detailed opinions about a particular matter where an employee requires it or requests it. Now that's the legal division, but also the enforcement, of course, will investigate complaints that are made, and the public education and communications division also operates. Probably the biggest task that we have as a commission is to educate. We spend an awful lot of time. Our education division puts on seminars around the state. And there are online training programs, webinars, and the like. Materials are published that relate to the details of the financial disclosure laws and the conflict of interest laws. This is ongoing. Employees come and go. And so it's an enormous task to educate employees, state employees, local employees, and county employees about the workings of the conflict of interest law.
And did you want to tell us a little bit about the advisories?
Well, that's something that we periodically do. As I said, our legal division responds all the time to requests for advice from state, local, and county employees about a particular incident or particular event or something that an employee might want to do, but want to seek advice as to whether it's legal under the conflict of interest law. There comes a time when you see that various areas of advice fit into patterns, and it becomes necessary to put all that together, not just the oral advice, but the written advice that's given. And if there's a subject that's recurring, and no advisory has been written for a number of years, staff will determine that it's time to put together something in a formal way, a formal advisory, so that people can refer to it and keep it on file, for instance, when needed. So that's something that the staff puts great effort into, as well as the commissioners. The commissioners, we're all lawyers. We meet and we review, usually at the level of a subcommittee, like our legal committee. Subcommittee will review a proposed advisory and give staff feedback on what should and should not be included, and whether it addresses the issue in the way that we like to see it addressed. And the advisory will ultimately be published for use by the public. And an advisory is usually very detailed and written in legalese, and it contains a lot of research and cases, case law that lawyers can use. It's certainly available to anybody, but I think lawyers have particular interest in seeing a compilation of how a particular problem has been addressed by the commission over the years, and can find it handy to refer to from time to time.
In plain English, Your Honor, what is the conflict of interest law the State Ethics Commission enforces?
Well, we primarily act to enforce Chapter 258A. It's the conflict of interest statute. Rather Chapter 268, the conflict of interest statute, which governs relationships between state officers, local officers, county officers, and their dealings, their personal dealings. It tries to foster confidence in the performance of an employee's duties as it relates separate from and keeping separate their personal interest. We also have the Chapter 268B, which is the financial disclosure law that falls within our jurisdiction, in which we require, in which certain designated employees and elected officials have to provide yearly a statement of their financial interest. And this is a good part of our work as well, to see to it that everybody who's required to file these statements will file them every year.
Please give us an example of the conflict of interest law that would violate these statutes that we're talking about.
Well, it's quite a broad statute. One area, which is probably something that people, can relate to, has to do with illegal gifts. And I'll just give you a hypothetical. Yeah. Let's say a public official has done something in the course of her work that a private citizen is delighted about, just thrilled that this public employee has done such a good job. Well, the citizen may be moved to send the official a gift certificate to a fine restaurant. Well, the public official cannot accept that gift certificate, even though it's well intended. No intent to bribe or to promote some kind of quid pro quo, but it is illegal for public officials to accept gifts in excess of $50 or more.
Is the conflict of interest law limited just to gifts?
No. As I said, it's quite broad. There are a number of areas that are encompassed by conflict of interest. There are areas like, let's first, misuse, let's say, of one's position. Let's suppose I'm still a judge. Let's go back to the time when I was a judge. And let's suppose, and this doesn't happen, let's suppose I'm speeding down the highway and I'm stopped. And a state trooper pulls me over and for speeding, and I say, in offering my license, I'm going to say, well, do you know who I am?
Oh, great.
That's a misuse of my position in order to gain something that a citizen would not be able to obtain. So that's contrary to the conflict of interest statute. There are other things as well. A state or other public employee cannot hold two positions in the same level of government.
Can you tell us about a specific enforcement issue that you're working on right now at the Commission?
No, unfortunately I can't. Our work is confidential unless a complaint gets to the level of an adjudicatory proceeding. It's important, and that's by statute. We require by statute, and our regulations flesh it out a bit more, that we hold in confidence the names of the people who contact us with complaints. We also hold in confidence the subject of those complaints.
So we are with our guest, Chairman of the State Ethics Commission, Barbara Dorch-Okara, law professor and former judge. Your Honor, please tell us, the State Ethics Commission is a public agency. Is your work public?
No. Yes, we are a public agency. We act in the interest of the public, but we have to hold our work in confidence until, as I said, until it reaches a certain point. Some of it never reaches that point. Many of our requests for advice come over the phone, and those even that come in writing. We want to encourage people to ask for advice. And in order to encourage individuals to ask for advice, you have to give them some assurance that their request is in confidence. People may be embarrassed about asking to do something that is maybe questionable. They may be embarrassed if you tell them, no, you can't do that. That would be a conflict of interest. They may be embarrassed for even contemplating that. And they want to have some assurance that their fears and concerns are shared with someone who can understand and keep that in confidence. And then on the other hand, as I said, we receive complaints. And oftentimes, we certainly proceed in due course to look into those complaints, but some of those complaints are not verified, and it would be quite troublesome to individuals to have them have their names shared with the public with the idea that they're violating the conflict of interest statute when they have not. So we don't do that until we reach the point in the process of reviewing those complaints, investigating those complaints, that we move to the adjudicatory process.
In that vein, if the commission receives a complaint, what steps does the commission take to resolve that, to bring that matter to a resolution?
Well, the first thing is that the matter is given an initial investigation. Some matters are cleared in the initial investigation. We have limits on what the jurisdiction, our jurisdiction, as I said, is 268A and 268B. Some matters don't fall within that jurisdiction, and some matters really cannot be verified. So if a matter, in fact, does go on beyond that initial stage, then staff, some of our enforcement staff will bring it to the attention of the commission and request permission to do a preliminary inquiry. That's our next stage in the process. If a complaint is more complex and we need additional effort to investigate it, or if that initial investigation tells us that this is something serious, we move on. At least staff feels the need to put the matter before us and ask for our permission to conduct a preliminary inquiry. Now, if we give staff permission to proceed to a preliminary inquiry, then they can proceed and summons documents and the like and proceed and inquire further into the matter. And then, of course, if they come back to us and ask us whether, with the view that the matter needs to go beyond that, and that there is reasonable cause to believe a violation has in fact occurred, if the commission votes and determines that yes, there is in fact reasonable cause to believe, then the matter goes to the next step, which is a request for an order to show cause. These are legal terms that are used, but it just takes us to the more public stage, which we call the adjudicatory process, in which will ultimately, or can ultimately, in a public hearing and a disposition of the matter.
Okay, but what is the authority that the State Ethics Commission has to enforce or to punish people who violate the law?
Well, we can impose civil fines. We can impose fines of up to $10,000 per violation. If a complaint involves a number of different violations, there can be a number of $10,000 fines that are imposed. Now, there's a certain area of our work that can result in a more significant fine, and that's the area of bribery. We are empowered to impose a civil penalty of up to $25,000 for a violation of the bribery statute.
That's pretty steep.
Yeah. And of course, there's some matters that you might expect may appear to be criminal, and then we would refer those matters to the Attorney General's office.
Criminal.
Yes.
Well, now you're wearing a few hats.
Yes.
You are a law professor at New England School of Law. Tell us about that.
Yes. I retired from the bench in 2012, and I began teaching as a professor of law at New England in January of 2013. And I teach criminal law to first-year students. I teach evidence. In fact, last fall I taught 2 evidence courses, and I'll be teaching 2 this semester, the coming fall. I also teach legal ethics.
Now, how much time can you dedicate to each of these very important roles?
Well, teaching requires a lot of time. That's my full-time job. That's the hat that I am wearing at this point. But there is quite a bit of work involved in chairing the Ethics Commission as well. We meet monthly, for sure. The meetings take several hours, and there's preparation for those meetings. There's a binder of materials that we have to review for each meeting. As chair, I speak on the phone with staff, throughout the month as various issues arise. We do have committees. I mentioned that we do committee work, our legal committee, our human resources committee. We meet for various things as things develop, and those meetings occur during the month. Sometimes before our monthly meetings, and sometimes separate from the monthly meetings. So it's that work and the preparation for those meetings as well. And when we receive cases, you recall I mentioned that we have these adjudicatory hearings. Each commissioner is required to act as hearing officer, and we may have 2 or 3 of those hearings in a given year. Now, I haven't been there long enough to have my 2 or 3, but that's something I do have to plan for. So, the work is significant, but it's spread out during the month, and I can organize it and accommodate my schedule as a professor as well.
So after being there for 6 months, what are your reflections and your impressions of the job? Tell us how you feel.
Well, I'm really amazed at the breadth and the depth of the work that's done at the Ethics Commission. I certainly, as a judge, was aware of the Ethics Commission. Of course, I had to file my statement of financial interest every year, as all judges do.
Right.
And I believe I've called them on occasion to inquire about matters. But I really did not understand the full scope of the work and the detail work, the hard work, the delicate work that's done. I mean, we have dealt with some very significant matters in those 6 months. And I am astounded by the staff. I mean, they are hardworking. They work unseen and unheard from for the most part, unless you're working. And they are quite a great staff, I would say, to work with. They provide all the background that the commissioners need to do their jobs, to decide the things that they need to decide. They go above and beyond what we request in putting together materials for the public and for the commissioners themselves. I'm quite proud of their work.
Well, and we're very impressed and very honored that you were able to come today, Chairman, Judge, and Professor Dorch-Okara. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. But thank you on behalf of our viewers and for everybody watching today. Thank you for your time. Today we had a very special guest, Chairman of the State Ethics Commission, Judge Barbara Dorch-Okara. And this episode can be viewed at www.discoveringthelaw.com. My name is Lucy Rivera, and thank you so much for watching.